Well, live on the Now Tampa Bay right now, you just finished hearing the president laying out his proposal to Congress, asking for a 3-year military campaign to fight ISIS. Now, we're breaking into Meredith right now because we do want to bring you some information on exactly what the president was saying, saying that sinking morale with the ISIS fighters is going to help America as we try and do something about this. I do want to bring in our special guest, though, because we are talking about this breaking information that we're getting. This is USF Professor Derek Harvey. You've done so much with CENTCOM. You've been in the Army. You see what the president is saying right now. He's claiming this is a bipartisan idea, but Congress still has to pass this, right?
That's correct. The president is asking Congress to give basically a reauthorization of like a War Powers Act focused on fighting the Islamic State. And this is a step back from the authorities he currently has in place from the 2002 Iraq War Powers Act that was passed.
Professor Harvey, I heard the president speaking there saying this would be maybe a 3-year type of deal. Well, that said, that would mean it would go into the next presidency, right?
Correct.
So maybe Congress is thinking, especially if Republican controlled, wondering should this be something we should go through with?
Well, actually what the president is doing is encumbering himself. He's narrowing his options, but he's also impeding a future president, at least for the first year, as far as his flexibility to use military force in regard to the Islamic State threat. The president already has abundant authorities right now. What he is trying to do is narrow the scope of what he's allowed to do and limit any future president.
It's hard to believe any president would get opposition from Congress when you see what ISIS has done. I mean, we just saw just a day ago Kayla Mueller, her family, speaking out, just the heartbreak that we're dealing with here in America. What do you think would be the holdup if Congress says, no, we're not doing it?
Well, there are two points here. On one side, Senator McCain, for example, and other Democrats that have the same view as Senator McCain and the larger Republican majority, they want to see stronger action and the president to be more aggressive in going after the Islamic State. If this passes, that will not be able to happen. On the other pole, there are those that are concerned about the last 10 years of war, and they really want to narrow what the president's authorities are. And they don't like this expansive authority that has been in place since 2002.
One thing President Obama did just mention, though, he said this is not authorizing troops on the ground. That's not what this is doing. This is basically trying to, and as he put it, it's going to be a difficult mission, but so we can go on the offensive. That's what he's saying, right?
Well, not exactly.
Okay.
This limits his ability to put combat troops on the ground in a broader, more aggressive way. It does allow him to continue to use special forces in direct action, support forces that might be in danger, air combat missions, and the like. But it does narrow and restrict him further from what his current authorities are.
You spent time with CENTCOM. Do you think we're moving too slow? Do you think we're moving too fast? Do you think it's just right?
I think the president has been trying to manage this campaign. Clearly, we have insufficient resourcing and a poorly articulated strategy right now to really go after the Islamic State. Part of the reason is we don't have an answer for the Syrian problem.
When you talk about the Syrian problem, expand on that a little bit, because a lot of people are saying those airstrikes are happening, there's nothing we can do about it. Then you've got Jordanian airstrikes happening at all the same time. It almost seems like we've got 3 or 4 different things happening which could all come together and possibly become war yet again.
Well, I'm not particularly worried about a wider war. What I'm concerned about is the effectiveness of the current campaign. The coalition that we have in place, the president said it's a strong coalition. It is not. It is weak and it is divided. Number two, ISIS's strength lies in Syria. And if we don't address the Syrian problem, you're never going to be able to really resolve, for the longer haul, the Iraq part of the problem.
The president said he does believe at this point ISIS is on the defensive. Do you believe that with everything we've seen in the media as of late?
They've been on the defensive in areas around Mosul and around Baghdad, but that's where that front line has been for some time. Shia militias and Kurdish Peshmerga forces, with some air power from the United States and other coalition members, have attrited the Islamic State. But they've gained much more ground over the last 5 months in Syria, and they've lost some ground in Iraq. Clearly, the initiative tactically still lies with ISIS in a number of places, but gradually these Peshmerga and Shia forces are starting to take hold and advance.
And is that helping at all? Is that helping the U.S. cause at all with what they're trying to do? Or do we, I mean, what happens next?
We are a long ways away from resolving this fight, because the Shia militias and the Kurdish militias are seen as human rights violators and committing atrocities against the Sunni Arab communities. You still do not have a political solution in Iraq. Prime Minister Abadi has not moved the political situation far enough. And Shia militias and Iranian influence have grown significantly in that environment without Sunni Arabs really getting a chance to get into the political game. It's not a recipe right now that bodes well for a good outcome in the near term.
This is not my opinion. This is fact, and this is what some people are saying on our Twitter feeds right now. A lot of people saying ISIS is simply barbaric. How can we not act right now? How can Congress not say, let's do this thing today and let's do it as hard as we can?
Well, it's not about Congress saying about the Islamic State threat, they're backing away from it. What they're saying is the president should be doing more, and this authorization is going to limit what the president is enabled to do. That's the problem here. Yeah. It's not about whether or not there's an authority to do what needs to be done. The president already has it. What he needs, what he's trying to do, is limit what he is able to do. So people might be misconstruing what is actually going on here in this debate over the War Powers Act.
I'm glad you brought that up then. What do you mean by limit? I mean, I guess, in layman's terms, we're trying to figure out exactly what President Obama is saying to limit that power you're talking about now.
He wants to limit the ability to put U.S. combat forces into this fight. He wants to limit the role that we can take in both Syria and Iraq and against the Islamic State, whether it's in North Africa, in Egypt, or someplace else.
So when you were the intelligence advisor to General Petraeus, let's say something like this were to play out, what would you say? What would be your next course of action?
In dealing with this situation, I would say that we need to align our strategy and our force structure and resourcing to be able to take the fight to the Islamic State. We have to look at this campaign as both in Iraq and in Syria. And we need to exert our leadership more strenuously and bring the Arab countries along. And we've been holding back. There's a lot of doubts in the region about our real commitment to this fight and whether or not we're going to really lead. And to date, I think that suspicion is keeping a number of countries on the fence. The other thing is the coalition is divided about the outcome in Syria. That's a large problem. And until you resolve the Syrian way forward, we're not going to be able to get Turkey and other countries on board in a way that serves the longer-term objective of taking down ISIS.
What do you think other countries' reservations are to join forces with the U.S.?
Clearly, it's about the U.S. role with Iran and their view that the president has been cozying up to Iran because he has his objective set on a nuclear deal with Iran, and he does not want our role in this fight with the Islamic State to undermine his rapprochement with Tehran. Secondly, the problem with Shia militias and the increasing role of Iran from Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq creates a great deal of fear across the Middle East. And it is viewed that the United States is at least acquiescing, if not supporting, this enhanced Iranian role.
So at this point, your final thoughts, what would they be? I mean, it's 3:58 right now. The president has said what he needs to say. Come tomorrow, where do you think we'll be?
There's going to be a debate that's going to go on for weeks, if not months, about this resolution that's been proposed by the president. It's not going to come out the way the president provided it to the Congress today. It will be modified significantly.
All right, thank you so much for being here. We do appreciate it, as always. USF Professor Derek Harvey, we do appreciate you being here with us.